One stray bullet changed two families forever. 2 years later, the woman who lost her brother would unknowingly answer a call from the Korean Mafia boss whose world had already changed hers. Neither of them knew the truth yet. Here's how it happened. If you love emotional stories where forgiveness is harder than revenge, subscribe. You'll want to stay until the very end of this one. It all started on a quiet residential street, the kind where nothing ever happens, until one ordinary evening changed two families forever. A quiet residential block, two crews, rivals, crossing paths over territory that mattered to no one but them. Gunfire, fast and ugly, over almost as soon as it started. One shot, fired from the wrong gun at the wrong second, found someone who had nothing to do with any of it. Marcus Carter, 22 years old. Walking home. I won't linger here longer than I have to. Some griefs don't need to be shown in detail to be understood. What matters is what happened after. At the funeral, flowers arrived with no card attached except for one. An envelope, quietly covering the last unpaid stretch of her clinical fellowship. The final hurdle standing between her and her full license. Fully paid, no name attached. Simone, 25 years old, already deep into the work she'd trained years for, hollowed out with grief, barely registered it at the time. She had no reason to wonder who'd sent it. She had every reason to be too devastated to ask. She didn't know, not yet, that the money had come from the very world that took her brother from her. A few weeks later, that world showed up at her front door in person. Hyungmin Choi did not have to come himself. Men like him rarely do, but he stood on the Carter family's porch anyway, flanked by two aides, his composure doing very little to soften what his presence actually meant. Simone opened the door and knew him instantly, not by name, by reputation, the kind of reputation that precedes a man into every room he ever walks into. I came to see if there's anything I can do, he said, quiet, careful. Genuinely meant, though it would take a very long time before she'd believe that. You've done enough, she said. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. Get off my porch. Take your men with you. He left without another word. She didn't know, standing in that doorway, that the man she just turned away was the same one who'd quietly paid for her brother's funeral. She wouldn't find that out for a long time yet. And if I told you now exactly how she finds out, you wouldn't believe how long it takes to get there. But I promise you, it's worth the wait. For now, just remember this doorway. We're coming back to it. Across the city, in a house with far more rooms than warmth, a little girl was teaching her grandfather a handshake for the 400th time. Hannah Choi was 7 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and a mind that noticed things most people walked straight past. The exact rhythm of a wind chime, the precise shade difference between two almost identical crayons, patterns and numbers that made her laugh out loud for reasons no one else in the room understood. Her grandfather, Beck, understood more than most. He'd been in the delivery room the day she was born, the same day, the same room, where he lost his own daughter and gained this fierce, complicated, luminous little girl in almost the same breath. He never left her side after that. Not once. Not for lack of trying on anyone else's part to pull him away. They had their own handshake. 3 taps, a spin, a final tap, hers invented, hers alone, and he never once got it wrong on purpose because getting it right every single time was its own kind of love letter. Again, Hannah said, delighted, and he obliged. Of course he obliged. Her father watched from the doorway, the way he often did, close enough to see, careful never to interrupt. Hyungmin Choi ran an empire built on fear. He commanded rooms with a look. Men who'd never flinched at anything flinched at him. And none of it, not 1 ounce of it, meant anything the moment his daughter needed something his power couldn't buy her. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, which is exactly how these things tend to happen. A restaurant. Too crowded. Too loud. A server who dropped a tray somewhere behind them without warning. The crash of the tray hit Hannah all at once. Sound stacked on sound. Faces pressed too close. Her breathing quickened. She covered her ears. The room became too much. His bodyguard stood by, unsure how to help, out of their depth for the first time in years. Hyung-min knelt beside his daughter, said her name, reached for her hand, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, nothing he did made anything better. He got her home. He got her calm, eventually, in her own time, in her own room, away from all that noise. But that night, alone in his study, he made a decision. If money could buy the best help in the world for his daughter, then money was going to buy it. Whatever it cost. Whoever it took. The name that came back to him after his people did what his people do was Simone Carter, a speech-language pathologist with a reputation for working with children exactly like Hannah, patient and skilled in a way that came up again and again in every quiet inquiry his staff made. He didn't recognize the name. It had been almost 2 years. Grief has a way of turning a name into a private thing, spoken rarely, kept close, and Hyung-min had made himself, deliberately, into a man who didn't ask too many questions about people his money quietly helped from a distance. He'd covered that stretch of her fellowship the way he covered a dozen other things. Through an intermediary, no name attached, no acknowledgement expected or wanted. He never connected the dots. Why would he? To him, the porch and the doorway had ended in a closed door years ago, filed away under the many things his world costs other people that he can never fully make right. So when his staff arranged for Simone Carter to be hired, quietly, generously, to work privately with his daughter, he made one decision that would end up meaning more than he could have known at the time. He stayed away from the hiring. He stayed away from the early sessions entirely. Guilt does strange things to a man. Sometimes it makes him show up in places he doesn't belong. And sometimes, this time, it makes him step back and let someone else's kindness reach his daughter without his shadow anywhere near it. He had no idea whose kindness he'd just invited into his home. She had no idea whose daughter she just agreed to help. Because how do you forgive the man whose world took your brother away? She walked into that house expecting a job. She didn't expect to fall in love with the child inside of it. Simone met Hannah on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. In a bright, toy-scattered room with grandfather Beck sitting close by, warm and watchful, and no father anywhere in sight. That absence, more than anything else, is what let her guard down as fast as it did. No looming presence. No reputation walking the halls. Just a little girl, curious and cautious, sizing her up. You have to knock the same way every time, Hannah told her very seriously on their second visit. 2 knocks, not 3. 3 is wrong. 2 knocks, Simone repeated. Got it. I don't break rules that matter. Something in that sentence, I don't break rules that matter, earned her more trust in 10 seconds than most adults managed in 10 weeks. I could tell you every session in detail. I won't because we'd be here far longer than either of us has time for. But there's one afternoon worth slowing down for, because it's the one that explains everything that comes after. It was a Thursday 6 weeks in. Hannah had been struggling all day, an assembly that ran long, a fire drill nobody warned her about, the kind of day that leaves a person like Hannah running on fumes by the time school lets out. Simone found her curled into the corner of the reading nook they used for sessions, knees to her chest, headphones on, refusing to look up. Simone didn't approach right away. She sat down on the floor a few feet off, back against the same wall, and waited without saying anything, because she'd learned by now that Hannah's silences weren't requests to be filled. After a long while, Hannah pulled one headphone off her ear. There's a fish, she said, apropos of nothing. In the show I watch, he forgets things every 7 seconds. Every 7 seconds his whole brain resets and he has to learn everyone's name again. That sounds exhausting, Simone said. It's not exhausting for him. He's happy. He just keeps meeting everyone like it's the first time. Hannah considered this with the particular seriousness she brought to everything. I think today my brain reset about 40 times and I was not happy about any of them. Simone laughed before she could stop herself, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and Hannah, delighted at having caused it, laughed too, first small and then completely, both of them dissolving into the kind of laughter that has nothing left to do with the joke itself and everything to do with two people who have found each other funny at exactly the right moment. It became theirs after that. A bad day was, from then on, simply a 40-fish day. And nobody outside that room ever fully understood why it made both of them grin every time either one said it. It wasn't the only kind of progress. 2 weeks later, Hannah walked up to a new student at school and introduced herself first, unprompted. A thing her file said she had never once done in 3 years of trying. She called Simone that same afternoon, breathless, to report it like a headline. I said my name before she said hers. I did it first. You did it first, Simone agreed, and meant every bit of the pride in her voice. None of it looked like much from the outside. A joke about a cartoon fish. A single sentence spoken first instead of second. But Simone had spent enough years in this work to know exactly what she was watching. A girl building one ordinary Thursday at a time, a version of the world she could actually stand inside of. Somewhere in the middle of all that, phone calls started happening that had nothing to do with therapy at all. Hannah would call just to talk, to report a 40-fish day, to ask whether fish actually forget things or if that was made up for the show. Simone would pick up every single time. Grandfather Beck noticed before anyone said a word out loud. He always did. It was an ordinary night when it happened. Video call, the three of them, Hannah in her pajamas, Beck beside her on the couch, Simone on the other end of the screen, laughing at something Hannah had just said about a cat that lived on their street. You should thank her, Beck said gently, nudging his son-in-law, who was passing by the doorway. Truly. Come, say something. I haven't seen her laugh like this in longer than I can remember. Hyung-min hesitated the way a man hesitates when he spent years staying carefully out of a frame. But his daughter was glowing, laughing, entirely herself, and gratitude, real and overdue, pulled him into view before caution could stop him. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, leaning into the screen. Whatever you've done, whatever you're doing, it's working. My daughter is. He stopped. She stopped him without a word, simply by being seen. Neither of them said anything for what felt, to everyone in that room, like an unbearably long moment. Here's the part one need you to sit with because it's the whole hinge of this story. Two people who had already met once on a porch years ago, one begging forgiveness he hadn't yet earned, one refusing to give an inch of it, were now staring at each other through a screen, both of them having spent months believing the other was simply a stranger. Neither of them saw this coming. Both of them should have. You, Simone said. Her voice had gone somewhere cold and far away. You devil. The call ended before anyone could say another word. Two people who don't know they've already been living inside each other's grief for 2 years. And now they know. If you think there's any coming back from a moment like that, drop a like right now because what happens next is going to test exactly that. The room sat in stunned silence. Hannah looked between the dark screen and her father, utterly confused. Why did she hang up? She always says goodbye. She always says goodbye. Beck, gentle as ever, had no answer to give her. He looked instead at his son-in-law, and the look on Hyung-min's face told him enough to know there was a conversation neither of them had been ready to have. Later that night, once Hannah was finally, reluctantly asleep, Hyung-min told Beck the truth. Not all of it, not yet the fullest, most exonerating parts of it, but enough. The gang war, the rival crew, the bullet that took a young man named Marcus Carter, and the sister he'd once stood in front of, asking for a forgiveness she wasn't ready to give. Beck said nothing for a long time. He was not a man from that world, and every part of him that loved his granddaughter fiercely also, quietly, feared exactly this, the violence of his son-in-law's world finally reaching all the way into the one relationship that had brought Hannah more joy than anything else in years. But he loved his granddaughter more than he feared anything. And his granddaughter needed her friend back. It was Hannah's idea to go find her. Beck, against every instinct of discretion this family usually operated by, agreed to sneak her out for exactly that reason. They found Simone at home, and the moment she opened the door and saw Hannah's face, hurt, searching, uncomprehending, every ounce of Simone's resolve to stay away met its match. She knelt down. Hannah didn't ask about her father. She only asked why her friend didn't say goodbye. "I'm sorry," Simone told her, and meant it completely, even through everything else still unresolved in her. "I should have said goodbye. That was never about you." They hugged. They talked. And when Beck, standing quietly at a respectful distance, asked if she would consider continuing, for Hannah's sake, Simone said yes, clearly, deliberately, only for the girl. Not for him. Not yet. Maybe not ever, she told herself, though even she wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. The second time she and Hyung-min occupied the same room, it wasn't planned by anyone. A meltdown, late at night, harder than most, overwhelmed, inconsolable, the kind of night that called for exactly the person who knew how to help. Beck called Simone directly, no hesitation, and she came, because Hannah came before anything else did. That's how Simone Carter ended up standing in Hyung-min Choi's home for the first time since a porch years ago, when she told him to leave and never come back. Neither of them said much. There wasn't room to, not with Hannah needing them both fully present. But something passed between them anyway, an unspoken agreement that whatever remained unresolved between the two of them, it would wait. Hannah came first. It always would. He watched her work. Patient, steady, exactly as gifted as his people had promised. Exactly as gifted as his daughter's laughter over these past months had already told him. And for the first time, guilt gave way just slightly to something else. Not forgiveness earned, just recognition of a woman doing something extraordinary for his daughter, despite every reason she had to walk away. He didn't reach for more than that night. He knew better than to ask for something he hadn't yet earned the right to receive. Weeks later, Hannah had one demand for her school's upcoming career day, and she would not be talked out of it. "Both of you," she told her father and grandfather, arms crossed with the particular seriousness only a 7-year-old can summon. And Simone. All three. That's the rule. It was, Hyung-min would later think, the first time in a long while that a rule of his daughter's had scared him a little, because it meant a room, a conversation, a proximity that neither he nor Simone had chosen for themselves. But it was Hannah's rule. And in this family, by now, everyone understood exactly whose rules mattered most. Neither of them knew yet that career day would be the place where everything finally got said out loud. Career day, as it turns out, is a strange place for two adults to finally have the conversation they've been avoiding for months. But grief and love have never once cared about finding a convenient setting. The gymnasium was full of construction paper banners and folding tables, parents in ill-fitting name tags talking about jobs their children barely understood yet. Hannah stood proudly between her father and grandfather, introducing Simone to anyone who'd listen as "my friend who talks to me the right way," a description that made Simone's throat tighten every single time she heard it. Between presentations, in a quiet hallway just outside the gym, Hyung-min found himself alone with her for the first time, here to hide behind a daughter's needs or a grandfather's presence. "I owe you the whole truth," he said. "No preamble. No armor. Not the version I gave Beck. All of it." Simone crossed her arms, bracing, the way she'd braced on her own porch 2 years earlier. "Then say it." So he did. He told her about the night his crew clashed with a rival gang over territory that, in hindsight, meant nothing at all. He told her that the moment he'd realized civilians were nearby, He'd already given the order to stand down. His men pulling back, disengaging, trying to end it before it escalated any further. He told her, plainly, without excusing himself, that the bullet that took her brother's life came from the rival gang's gun, not his own men's. He hadn't pulled that trigger. His men hadn't pulled that trigger. But his war, his world, his presence in that neighborhood had created the conditions for her brother to be in danger in the first place, and he would never once ask her to pretend that didn't matter. "I'm not telling you this so you'll forgive me," he said. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know exactly what happened, instead of only knowing the worst version of it." Simone said nothing. Her jaw was tight, her eyes bright, unreadable. He wasn't finished. "The fellowship," he said quietly. "The flowers with no card. Every bit of help your family received after Marcus died, that was me. I never told you. I never told anyone outside this family. I didn't want gratitude for something I could never undo." And there it was, the second truth, the one that had been sitting quietly under 2 years of her life without her ever knowing its source. I won't pretend that moment resolved itself neatly because it didn't, and it shouldn't have. Some truths need room to breathe before they can be believed. "I need to think," Simone said finally, and walked away before he could say anything else. He let her go. He'd learned, by now, exactly when to let her go. That night, alone in her apartment, Simone sat with a box she hadn't opened in almost 2 years. Old cards, an unsigned note, a folded fellowship payment letter with a name blacked out on the sender line by whatever lawyer or accountant had handled it on his behalf. She read it again, slower this time, looking for anything she might have missed the first time through her grief. There was nothing new in the words. There was everything new in who they came from. Grief and gratitude are not supposed to sit in the same chest at the same time. And yet there they were, both of them, refusing to leave. She thought about her brother, not his death, for once, but the sound of his laugh, the particular way he used to steal fries off her plate without asking. She thought about Hannah's laugh, eerily similar in its total lack of restraint. She thought about a man who'd kept 2 years of quiet kindness a secret rather than ask for anything in return. She didn't decide anything that night. But something in her had already begun to shift, whether she was ready to admit it yet or not. A few days later, she went to see Grandfather Beck. Not Hyungmin, not yet. Some conversations need an outsider first, someone who's earned trust without needing anything back. "I know why you're here," Beck said, before she'd said a word, guiding her to sit with the particular gentleness of a man who'd spent years learning exactly how to make space for someone else's pain. "Did you know?" she asked. "About the money. About all of it." "I suspected," he admitted. "A father does not fund a stranger's grief for 2 years without a reason. I never asked him directly. Some things a man needs to carry quietly, in his own time." He studied her carefully. "You lost a brother to a war that was never yours. I lost a daughter in the same room I gained a granddaughter. Grief does not ask permission before it visits, and it does not leave just because we forgive someone. But forgiveness was never about erasing the loss, Simone. It's about deciding the rest of your life doesn't have to be shaped by it." She didn't cry in front of him, not exactly, though it was close. But something loosened in her chest that had been tight for 2 years. She went to see her brother that weekend. Not literally. There was no grave to visit his ashes. His in an urn on their mother's mantel 2 states away. But she drove out to the overlook where they used to sit as kids, the one place in the city that had somehow stayed exactly the same while everything else kept changing around it. She sat on the same guardrail they used to sit on, feet swinging over a drop that had always looked bigger than it actually was, and she talked to him the way she hadn't let herself in a long time. "You'd hate this," she said out loud, to no one, to him. "You'd have so many jokes about it. The mob boss, the little girl, me, of all people, Falling for the last man on earth I should be falling for. She laughed, short and wet. You always did like proving me wrong about people. She thought about the fries he used to steal off her plate without asking, the specific outrage of it, the specific way she missed being outraged by it now. She thought about the box of unsigned cards sitting on her kitchen counter, about a man who had ordered his own men to stand down before anyone official ever told her the word stand down existed in a story like this, about 2 years of quiet, unclaimed kindness that had asked for nothing in return, not even her knowledge that it had happened. I don't think hating him keeps you here, she said, finally, to the water, to the skyline, to whatever part of Marcus she still carried around with her everywhere she went. I think it just keeps me somewhere I don't want to live anymore. Nothing answered her. Nothing needed to. She sat there until the sky started to change color, and when she stood up to leave, she did it the way people do when they've actually decided something instead of just thought about it for a while, plainly, without ceremony, already walking before she'd fully noticed she'd moved. It wasn't instant. It wasn't total. Grief doesn't close up like a door being shut. But it was real, and it was hers, arrived at on a guardrail she used to share with her brother, on her own terms, in her own time. When she told him, it wasn't with a speech. It rarely is, in real life. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't still hurt, she said, standing in his study, the same house that had once felt like enemy territory to her. But I don't want to hate you anymore. I don't have room left for it. Not with how much room your daughter's taken up in my life. Hyung-min exhaled like a man setting down something he'd been carrying for 2 years without realizing how heavy it had become. I love her, he said. You already know that. What I haven't said is that somewhere in the middle of all of this, I fell in love with you too. Not because of what you've done for Hannah, though God knows I'm grateful for that every single day. Because of who you are, in the rooms where no one's watching. Simone didn't answer right away. She didn't need to rush it. Ask me properly, she finally said, the smallest, most reluctant smile pulling at her mouth. Don't just tell me how you feel. Ask. So he did, plainly, without any of the polish his world usually demanded of him. Simone Carter, would you be my girlfriend? Yes, she said. On one condition. 2 knocks. Not 3. He didn't understand the joke yet. He would, soon enough, the first time he tried Hannah's rule and got it wrong on purpose just to hear her laugh. A few weeks after that, the family went back to the same restaurant where it had all started. The crowd, the crash of the tray, the room that had once become too much for her to stand inside of. Hannah asked to go. Nobody suggested it to her. She walked in, chose the booth herself, and when the noise rose the way it always did in a full room, she reached into her bag and put on the headphones she'd picked out on her own that same week. A set she'd chosen, tested, and decided worked best for her, no one else's opinion required. She ordered her own food, in her own words, to a server who had no idea what that particular sentence cost or how far she'd come to say it so plainly. Nobody at that table needed to say how big a moment it was. Beck reached for her hand under the table once and let go. That was enough. It wasn't a moment that belonged to her father or to Simone or to the romance quietly unfolding around her. It belonged entirely to Hannah, a room she'd once had to be carried out of. Now a room she'd simply chosen to walk back into, on terms she'd set herself. Months later, in a warm, ordinary kitchen that had once been the quietest room in a very loud house, Hannah taught her father the handshake one more time, 3 taps, a spin, a final tap, while Grandfather Beck supervised with the seriousness of a man overseeing state business, and Simone leaned in the doorway, laughing at all of them. The devil she'd once named him, in a moment of grief neither of them will ever pretend didn't happen, had become, slowly and honestly, something else entirely. Family, chosen this time by every single person in that room.